Thank you very much. This is fair warning that I'm speaking English. You may doubt it as I go on, and I apologize to the interpreters if I speak too quickly. I have 15 minutes in which to talk to you about two things which I think you may find quite shocking, and then I have to somehow get off the stage without you thinking that I'm also crazy. I want to say at the very beginning, though, that I fully support what you just heard from Silke. I very much agree with her framework of the Commons and the importance of that as a guideline as the World Social Forum moves ahead and looks at its plans in the decades ahead. I want to also argue that we are facing new threats to the Commons. And while I am fundamentally optimistic about the future, I do believe that another world is possible. And I actually have some suggestions in detail of how some of that can be done. I really just cannot do it in the 15 minutes, so I'm going to confine myself to what I'm afraid I usually do, which is tell you all the bad news. Because I do think it's critical for us to be aware of those things that are coming, those threats that will affect us in the years ahead. And there are new threats. It's important because I think we only became aware of the loss of biodiversity after 3/4 of it was gone. We only became aware of the threat of GMOs and biotechnology once the crops were in the field. We have to turn that around. We have in civil society, within us in this room, the ability to see what is coming, to see the trend lines, and to turn them around now. But if we don't talk about them in advance, if the World Social Forum isn't a place where we can see these new threats that are coming to us, then no place else is. There is no other place. So I'm going to try to identify, so that you don't think I'm entirely crazy, I'm going to try to put these two new threats I'll talk about in a context. In the 1970s, the concern that I had, and many of us in this room, was of injustice, of hunger. Especially for me, the concern was hunger and the need to protect the environment. The concern for industry was how to control a highly decentralized marketplace, how to make more profits from agriculture. The tool that industry used in the 1970s was to argue that there was a new technology that would solve all of our problems, that would feed the hungry, clothe the naked, take care of the environment, so we could all live happily ever after. And that tool was biotechnology. It was a myth. And they said, if you will simply give us, first, the intellectual property we require to own life, so that we can recoup our expenses, make our profits, we can afford to try biotechnology. Secondly, they said, if you will suspend competition policies so that pesticide companies can buy seed companies and pharmaceutical companies can buy the pesticide and the seed companies, then we can have the concentration of economic wealth that can introduce biotechnology. And thirdly, they said, the third requirement, we need to get rid of public sector competition. We need to get rid, in the sense of part of the Commons. We need to make the public sector work as the servants of the private sector in their research. Well, they got those three things, and now we have biotechnology. And it is, by any definition, a lousy technology. It's sloppy, it doesn't really work, it's very poor, and who cares? Because they're still making money from it, because they have got rid of the competition, because they've got rid of the public sector. because they now have the patents they need to control life. So no matter that technology doesn't work, they've got the marketplace under control. Now, today, we have a problem. Same old problem we had 30 years ago. A world full of hunger, an environment that's collapsing. We call it climate change. It's wider than that. And we're surrounded by one problem after another, including fossil fuels and so on. Industry, again, has a solution, because their problem is different. What they say is, we've got to find a way to make climate change profitable. They say that they have to find a way to control the world's biomass so that the biomass can be made more productive. If there's one fact you should walk away from this morning from what I'm saying, it's this, because I hear it from industry all the time. They say, don't you understand that today only 24% of the world's annual terrestrial biomass is commodified, is part of the commercial market, is owned. That means that 76% of the world's annual commercial biomass, or annual biomass, terrestrial biomass, is not commodified. It's out there to be owned. It's in the commons, and it's got to be taken away from the commons. And that is their goal. They're also saying that the only way that they can actually make money from climate change is by claiming that they have the technological fix so that industry can, on the one hand, carry on doing what it is already doing, and secondly, be able to say, but don't worry about that because we have a new technology that you will pay for that will take care of the world's thermostat. So in fact, the technologies that they are developing are technologies to control and to own the thermostats of the planet. 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, my organization invented the phrase or the term biopiracy. We talked about the piracy of biological resources of indigenous peoples and farmers around the world. Today, what we're talking about is Gaia piracy, the piracy and control of Gaia. And that is what's happening. In fact, for industry, Copenhagen was a marvelous success because, one, they can continue with business as usual, and secondly, and most importantly, they are saying now that Copenhagen proved that the multilateral community, the United Nations, the community of nations, can't make a decision. Therefore, a handful of governments, or even just a few billionaires, must solve the problem of climate change. And the only solution is what they call Plan B. And Plan B is geoengineering. Geoengineering, restructuring, basically, the planet. And of course, they have a strong scientific basis for saying that they should do this, because the proof of principle of geoengineering already exists. The reason why we have climate change is because industry has geoengineered the planet into this crisis. We know human beings can transform the planet. We're doing it. They're saying now the job is to geoengineer it in another direction. And they're saying the companies who caused the problem are saying, trust us, we'll get you out of this problem. Just give us the resources, give us the money we need, and the intellectual property controls we need to geoengineer the planet. There's a meeting taking place in March of this year, in a few weeks' time, and it's taking place in Asilomar, California. For those of you who have had a long history in the GM debates, in biotechnology, Asilomar is a famous place. In 1975, genetic engineers came together in Asilomar and established a voluntary code of conduct on how they would conduct biotechnology. And at the end of the conference, they said to the world, okay, now you can relax. We scientists are in charge. We've agreed on how we can cooperate, and governments don't need to regulate anything. And the Asilomar conference set the conditions for the biotechnology industry we see today. At the end of March, in Asilomar, not the genetic engineers, but the geoengineers are coming together, knowing where they're coming, knowing the history, and saying, we will now establish, as scientists, a code of conduct on how we will geoengineer the planet. And they can't be allowed to do this. When I say geoengineering, I know it sounds crazy, but let me give you some examples of what it means and who's funding it, because it is now being funded by governments.